There we are. We are good. Hi, everybody. Steve Sande here, and we're back for episode, I think it may be 5 or 6. I don't know. It's been a while since we did one of these. But anyway, we're back for Apple World Today Live, otherwise known as AWT Live. I'm Steve Sande, and the gentleman with me right over, whoops, it's the other way. He's over there. Is Jim Lee from Tropical Software. He's going to be our guest today. And for those of you who are watching this show for the first time, usually what we do is bring in people from the world of Apple, developers, equipment manufacturers, notables like Chuck Joyner from Mac Voices. We'll bring these people in, ask them embarrassing questions. I'm kidding about that. But we ask them questions and just all in all have a really good time. And the idea is for you to get to know people in the world of Apple a little bit better. So, hi, Jim. How are you doing today?
Great. How are you doing today?
I'm doing great. It looks like it's snowy in your background there. You're actually in Florida, aren't you?
Yes, I got to playing with these backgrounds, and I found one from the Purdue campus that had a light dusting of snow that I thought was just beautiful, and then decided to just toss it up there for fun.
Oh, that's great. You know, it's always fun. I usually put it's just like a brick wall or something like that behind myself, and that's why I've got the green screen right now. You know, the people will not know that there's a green screen behind me, when I'm done. But your background is great. I feel cold just looking at you there. That's great. Well, anyway, Tropical Software, I realize you've been in the business since 1994, it looks like. You can't be that old. You're definitely not
even
that
older.
Okay, you're even older. But anyway, your company produces all sorts of good apps for the Mac, like TopX Notes. We've got To Remember, Kitchen Timer, and then you also have versions of TopX Notes for iPhone and, well, otherwise known as iOS, but iPhone and iPod Touch. Why don't you start by just giving our audience a little bit of background about yourself, about the company, and what you do.
Sure. Well, I'm a native Floridian, one of those weird guys who went up north to get my education. So I'm a Purdue graduate, degree in geophysics, of all things.
Cool.
And I spent about 10 years in the geo world before I made the switch to the Mac world. I actually was in graduate school, and you at one point asked what might be my original product, which would be an Apple IIc.
Cool.
I had actually managed to pick up a second one, so I could have one at the office and one at home. And I remember, carrying things back and forth on floppy disks.
Yeah.
And then at one point I was going into the University of Houston's repair facility, and there was a gal standing in line next to me with a Mac. And she said that it had a bad power supply and was going to be $350 to repair it. She didn't know what to do with it. She was thinking of getting rid of it. But I offered her $100 for it, even knowing it didn't work. And she gave it to me, basically. She's tired of dealing with it, and so I spent the $350 on the power supply, and have been a Mac lover ever since. It was just a great experience. Get rid of the 2Cs as fast as I could.
I was wondering, since you had two of the 2Cs, did you ever get the little LCD panel screen, the portable screen that they had?
No, I don't even remember they had one.
Yeah, it was, almost made it a laptop. It was kind of I don't remember ever seeing more than one of those, but somebody I used to know had one, or used to know somebody I know used to have one, and it was just a little, kind of a monochrome, if you want to put it that way, display, but it was a little liquid crystal display, and it attached, and it kind of turned the 2C into a laptop, but like I said, I think it was so expensive that nobody bought them. One of those great Apple products. Well, I was just curious, what year was that you got that first Mac?
I'm not really sure I can put my finger on it without doing some research. It was, a Mac Classic, an original, so it would have been maybe a few years after they came out, I would guess.
So what made you decide to, go from being a Mac user to learning how to develop for it?
Well, when I was in the geo world, went over to Saudi Arabia for a year. At the time, there were 20,000 unemployed geologists and geophysicists in Houston, and the Saudis had money, and I needed to work, so I went over there, and I ended up being in charge of Mac support for Aramco.
I'll be damned.
It turned out that they only had about 10 Macs, and they were all in one room. And there were, it's the long story, but the short story is when I came back, after about a year, there were still 20,000 unemployed geologists and geophysicists in Houston. And I read a little ad about Apple opening, an article about Apple opening a support facility in Austin. I thought, well, I've been supporting Macs as a graduate student, and I know a little bit about it. I'll see if I can get hired. And sure as heck, I able to talk my way into the job, mainly because I knew a little bit about the older Apple computers, and I could take those kind of calls. And I spent a year at Apple Assistance in Austin. I was probably the oldest guy there. And while I was there, I had already decided I wanted to use Macs for the rest of my life, because I thought everything they did was so productivity friendly. And so I started researching after after it kind of got stabilized and learned how to do phone support, which I had never done anything like that before in my life, where you get on the phone with somebody and try to help them with their problems. And once I got to be pretty good with that, after 3 or 4 months, I started researching, but that was not a real highly paid job. I thought, well, what can I do that is better paid? And I immediately realized that the Mac developers were very well paid. And there were a lot of open jobs, but they're scattered all over the country. But, well, I know Fortran from scientific days. It's going to be that hard to learn C, so I started teaching myself C in the evenings when I wasn't on the phone for Apple. And then I learned just enough C++ to talk my way into my first job in Houston. And went back to Houston, where my wife was, and I was very happy about that. And 4 days later, that company went out of business.
Oh, no. Oh.
And that sort of kicked off this Mac development / troubleshooting guy. And I started going wherever the jobs were. I went to Chicago, I went to South Florida, came back to Houston, I went a couple of other different places and worked on different applications. And I had a goal, which was to develop a Mac from the ground floor up using a modern framework, which at that time was PowerPlant. And I finally did that, and then once I got that on my resume, I just got called left and right. And I worked out in Silicon Valley for a few years. Ended up being a development manager for Symantec for a year
Ah,
of Norton antivirus and NIS. And I worked these jobs for a year or two and then moved on to a better one. And eventually I got tired of moving around and decided to start my own business. So that's probably a much longer answer than you were anticipating.
well, it's fascinating, and it's so interesting, how many people, being in Denver, we also had the oil and gas crash, and my one cat is talking over here, so if you hear him meowing,
I
she's
don't hear them.
she's interested in something. I'm not sure what, but maybe she just she likes geophysics types who get into development or something. But yeah, we had the similar type of thing. I actually worked for I was a civil engineer by training. Worked for a natural gas pipeline company, and I kind of dabbled with computers as a hobby at home, and it just turned into one of those situations where I was one of the few people who knew anything about computers in the office, and they made me do a study, to determine how we could start up our own, computer department there. And that turned into a career in IT. So it's interesting how people, a lot of people in science and technology or engineering technology, how they gradually moved into the what we see today, the IT world. Now you have people who are kind of going straight into it because it's such a intense and big industry. But in our day, we were kind of the folks who started it all. So I love it when I see another young guy like myself here, like you, Jim. We got it started for the rest of these folks. So anyway, your biggest product right now is TopX Notes, and I know we actually have. I think we've got an ad for it, or maybe it's for To Remember. But anyway, on the website, if people go over to Apple World today and you look at the right sidebar, scroll down a little bit, and you're reading stuff, you'll see an ad there. And but tell us a little bit about your product line and why your products are so good for everybody, for Mac users. I mean,
all of our products, except for Kitchen Timer, have sort of a common theme. I've always been interested in little user interface tricks that help productivity. So when we first developed Top 10 Notes.
Oh, Top 10 Notes. I've been calling it Top X Notes. I'm sorry.
Yeah, we have a little fun with the Roman numeral thing. But it's always fun to see how people get that, whether they get that right or wrong. So we had a little feature called Quick Notes. It was a feature of Top 10 Notes, and it was a little floating icon that when you clicked on it, dropped down a list of your top 10 notes, or as many as you wanted, actually. But not necessarily every note in your notepad, but the key ones that you used all the time.
Okay.
So that turned out to be the most popular feature of the program because people had never seen anything quite like it. It's not really an approved Apple user interface to have a menu drop down out of an icon. It's floating around the desktop. But people place it where they want it, and it remembers the position and comes back there when you restart the Mac or the app.
Cool.
And,
so it's basically one of those things where it's out of the way until you need it, and you know where it is because you placed it in that particular location. So kind of gets out of the way when you're not writing notes, and it's there when you need it.
Yes, exactly.
Cool.
And it also is not a system menu item. At the time, when we started this, which actually was an OS 9 app originally, people were cramming everything and their pet pig into the system menus. So
Yeah.
they were right over one another and pushing each other out of the way and so forth. And I wanted to do something a little different, even though that was a more popular way to do it. And that was part of the motivation behind the floating icon. And the next one I'll talk about is To Remember, which uses a different user interface trick. It uses a tab that you can attach to the left or right side of your screen by just dragging the list of reminders to the edge of the screen, and then it transforms itself into a little tab with a check mark in it.
Nice.
And that sort of fascinated me when I came across it, and we were able to obtain that product and work on it and enhance it and so forth. And then, of course, later, I gave in to the system menu thing when we got iAddressX, because it just seemed to be the way to do things for navigation of your contacts. At the time, back at the address book era before contacts, it could be kind of awkward to find your way around Apple's contacts. And we thought hierarchical navigation would be a good way to go. And the people who have it seem to love it. It's not super popular, but it's super loved by its customers. That's something we've been working on extensively over the summer, because one of the problems with an app like that is that you have to support other products, and those products go out of vogue. So at some point you have to remove them from your product and hope that nobody's going to miss them, because they just don't make sense anymore. And so we've been doing a bunch of that sort of thing. But we've added new features to iAddressX also. So it's
cool.
Kind of an unending maintenance nightmare in a way, but that's also progress.
Well, speaking of progress, I know we've got, excuse me, I'm coughing. It's not COVID, and I don't think we're in the same room anyway, but I was going to say, in terms of the fact that we've got Mac OS Big Sur coming out here pretty quickly, what do you see, and are there any specific challenges that you ran into in terms of compatibility, or does it look like it's top 10 notes and To Remember, and the other products are going to just kind of slide right in there?
Well, I had a little bit of a complicated answer. Top 10 Notes has gone into dormancy because it's a 32-bit app. Okay. And so it's on our list for a complete rewrite. And as soon as we get our updates finished for the other apps, we'll do nothing but top 10 notes until we get the rewrite done.
Cool.
So far, iAddressX and To Remember, Kitchen Timer all work on Big Sur. I've had a copy of it, and I have a developer transition kit, and so far so good. So that's the good news, because we had the bad news with Catalina that there was no 32-bit apps. So that basically destroyed years of development. And we've got a big job for rewriting it. But hopefully it'll be better eventually.
Yeah, that's it's one of those things. Especially, I'm seeing it with smaller shops, but it's you've got that code, and then Apple kind of throws that. Hey, as of such and such a date, we're not going to support whatever this is, anymore. And for the smaller shops, and I'm taking it, the Tropical software is definitely one of those. It's much more difficult to get the resources involved just to be able to rewrite the app. And you kind of wish Apple would make it a little bit easier for everybody to work. You said you got the developer transition kit. Does that include the Apple Silicon Mac Mini?
That is the Apple Silicon Mac Mini, yes.
Cool.
It's
Anything interesting you can tell us about that, or does it just seem like
I'm not
another
sure
Mac?
how much I'm supposed to talk about that thing.
Oh, okay.
So it's been an interesting experience so far. I'll just kind of leave it at that. Nothing terribly wrong with the unit or the software. So.
Yeah, from what I understand, there were some people who were, expecting it to be just a regular Mac Mini, and I'm trying to remember what it didn't support, like Thunderbolt 3 or something like that isn't supported, and so there was some concern about that.
There are a number of things. It doesn't seem to support multiple monitors, which is unfortunate. I think that'll come. These are things that usually come along eventually. They don't usually drop support for things like that. So
yeah, I think there would be widespread revolt if support for multiple monitors went down the tubes there. Maybe they'll say, "Hey, everybody, just buy yourself an iPad Pro, one of the large ones, and use Sidecar, so you've got, that's your second monitor there."
Pretty small monitor.
Darn small monitor there.
Yeah.
By the way, I'm going to go ahead and mention that we did a review, or I didn't. Dennis did, of iAddress a little while back, and I'm going to go ahead and make sure that we put a link to that review in the show notes so people can read his comments about the app. He liked it, which is always a good thing. But we're going to be, once again, I'll put that into the show notes so everybody can go take a look.
That'd be great. I actually just discovered today that we had a link to that review on our iAddress X page.
Cool.
But it was way down at the bottom, and I hadn't remembered it. I hadn't seen it for so long. So.
Yeah, I tell you, it's funny because we've been around since, well, the website has been up and running, I should say, since February of 2015. And you think 5 years, that's not that long, but you start realizing how many thousands and thousands and thousands of articles we've had out there, and all the things that have changed during the biggest challenge we've got coming up is, and I've kind of mentioned this before on the show, but we're looking at doing a complete redesign of the site and moving it off of Squarespace and moving it over to WordPress, simply because WordPress has a lot more flexibility for doing things. But the big challenge there is going to be trying to grab all those years worth of articles and then moving them over to the new system. And fortunately, I found an app that does scraping of websites, and allows you to create this big database. And hopefully, I'll then be able to take that database and dump it into the new system. But I've got. I think we're looking at 3 more months to get all of this done, and I'm beginning to start having nightmares about it. So,
Yeah, we've run into some problems like that when we've changed things around on our website and like completely messed everything up because we use a slightly different mapping.
Oh,
and,
wow.
You forget that those paths to subpages, if you will, on your website are all over the place. And
yeah.
That's part of your recognition on the internet, is to have all those backlinks, if you will.
Yeah.
And if you start moving things around and renaming them, they just disappear.
Yeah. So all of a sudden they're gone.
Yeah.
People are clicking links and going, "Wow, this particular site must be out of, no longer in existence because I, click on this link and it's not going there." And it's like, well, they're actually there. It's just that path, like you said, changed. I got a question to ask you. Since you've had Macs for quite some time now, what's your favorite Mac of all time?
Actually, I'm very pleased with my MacBook Pro that is unfortunately in need of replacement. It's 6 years old, but I was fortunate enough to get one that was relatively easy to upgrade, and I've upgraded to solid state as well as the memory. And this thing just flies. I'm very pleased with it. 15-inch, it's never had a problem. I took it apart and upgraded it myself with some kits from oh shoot, what's it called?
Oh, Mac Sales?
Pardon?
MacSales.com or OWC?
Yeah, Max Sales,
Yeah.
OWC, yes, exactly. I've been using those guys for years for different things, and this was, they just happened to have the kits that I wanted, and I looked at it and saw I didn't involve any soldering or
Yeah.
any real difficult disassembly. And I was very pleased because I had a similar thing with an old 17-inch MacBook, and I broke the logic boards.
Oh, no. Oof.
Yeah, it became an external monitor machine only.
Yeah, don't feel bad. When I was doing consulting, I had one client that had, kind of a mix. They had brand new machines and they had older machines. And they had it was a pretty old MacBook. I'm talking probably, and this was in 2011 or 2012, but it was probably, one of the first Intel MacBooks. And they said, "Hey, can you upgrade this thing? Can we get it to work a little bit better? Bigger hard drive, do all the rest of that." And it was funny because I'd been doing a lot of upgrades at that time, and I said, "Sure, no problem." But just in case it doesn't work, for some reason I just felt a little strange about it. And sure enough, I had nothing but problems with that. And usually, like you said, the OWC upgrades were a piece of cake, especially on some of the earlier machines. You'd pop out the battery pack on a MacBook, cram the, unscrew some things, take off this thing, put in your SIMs or DIMMs, and, maybe put in a new hard drive. And it was just a piece of cake. And this machine, I don't know if it had been just run continuously for years or whatever, but it had a bunch of brittle parts. And when I went to plug in the hard drive, the connector that you connected into just literally just snapped right off. And I wasn't putting that much pressure on it. It was just kind of a light push. I had my fingers behind it, and this thing just went boom, like that. So fortunately, I had said, this is a pretty old machine. If anything happens, you're okay with that, right? And sure enough, something happened. They were like, "Oh, no problem. We'll just replace it." So, thank God.
I had a very similar experience with the 17-inch PowerBook. In order to upgrade the hard drive, you had to remove the keyboard. So you take it apart, and the keyboard had a little wire, a little like double wire with a tiny little plug. Literally went through a hole in the logic board and plugged in on the other side of it, which was weird in itself. And unfortunately, I misunderstood how the plug and receiver worked together. and how to release it. And I pried a little too hard and detached the receiver part of it from the logic board,
Ooh.
and it wasn't really repairable. So.
Yeah, we've all had those nightmares, but at least the machines used to be user upgradable, and I think that's one thing. Oh, I got a cat in my lap here. I think that's one of the things that I miss the most about, a lot of the older machines was that upgradability. If you didn't have the money at a particular time to buy a fully tricked out machine, you knew that you were always going to be able to go out and for less than Apple was charging for it, you could get more RAM, you could get a bigger hard drive, do whatever there. The one good thing I do like about the new ones, at least we've got USB-C, Thunderbolt 3. I will have a review probably out there today or tomorrow, and you're going to see a cat tail. I don't know why he's deciding to sit in my lap right now, but anyway, I've got a review of one of the OWC products, Envoy Pro EX, and it's a little SSD drive with Thunderbolt 3. I can't believe how fast that doggone thing is.
It's amazing.
It's just, it cooks. And I don't mean that it gets hot. I mean, it's really speedy. Yeah, I was just totally impressed with it. And, for me to get impressed about external drives is usually doesn't happen. This one, I'm seriously thinking of buying one for my current machine, which is a MacBook Pro, because it's nice to have a drive that is as fast as the machine that I'm using.
Mm-hmm.
Well, this is interesting. I was just noticing that I think one of the cats unplugged my Mac, speaking of which, because it just suddenly went to low power mode there. I need to plug in my MacBook again because the cord came out. Excuse me. There we go. Yay, we're plugged in. Gotta love my cats. Fun and games there. But so you really like the existing MacBook that you've got, probably.
Yes, it's one of the last ones that's upgradable.
Yeah.
With ease. So I'll probably end up, like you say, buying a more expensive one next time around.
Yeah. Well, that's
probably when we have to return this development transition kit to Apple.
Boo.
And make the investment.
Yeah, I bought this 16-inch last November, and I don't know, if you saw that on the website, but I'd had it for about, a month and a half or somewhere around there. And one day I was doing some work. I had a glass of water, spilled the water, and it just really did a lot of damage. Fortunately, the good thing was I brought it over to the Apple store, told them exactly what had happened, and they said, oh yeah, we can tell. It would still boot up, but the screen was just this mess. It was just horrible. And they said, oh, it's going to be a depot repair, so we're going to send it off, and they're going to get it done, and we'll call you when it comes back in. And, since you have Apple Care Plus, it should be pretty inexpensive, a couple $100, something like that. And I got it back, and they didn't charge me a dime for it. And I think it may be because, if you take a look at a customer's history, it goes back, to 1984. They probably said, let's give this guy a freebie or something. I was totally shocked, because it was really damaged. I got an all new screen, whole new logic board, whole new keyboard. The only thing I think that was left on it was the case more than anything.
I think the only thing worse than spilling a lot of water on your keyboard is spilling a lot of milk on your keyboard.
Ooh. You've done that, I take it?
I did that years ago, yes.
Well, I can recall.
Fortunately, it was not a portable, so it was just a keyboard, but it was not cleanable.
Well, I've had more than one client back in the days when I was running a IT department, but I'd get a phone call and they'd say, my keyboard's not working. Could you come over and take a look? And you go over and you start typing on it. It's like sticky. And I went, let me guess, did you spill a Coke on it or, some other soft drink? And it'd be, yep, I did. And said, don't worry about it. We'll replace it. We'll get you a new one. But, oh, man, can't do that with a laptop, definitely. Speaking of Apple products, are there any Apple products over the years that you've just hated? You thought, why did they come out with this thing?
Not really. I kind of always wanted one of everything.
Yeah.
So I probably, and I didn't have that kind of money, so I would end up usually with one newer machine and an older machine I kept to backup. But even the Cube, I kind of wanted to play with it. Even though I knew it had plastic problems, I thought it was a cool design. I loved the lamp-based iMac that came out, the first one. I really, I had some bad reactions to things that Apple did that turned out that Steve Jobs was a genius after all. It's like the elimination of the hard drive in the iMac. So many people were upset about that, but it turned out to be just ahead of its time.
Yeah.
And there are a lot of stories like that out of Apple. So I never really, I guess I've been fortunate. I never really got a lemon.
Yeah, the only one, and I probably brought this up when I've talked to people before, but the only one I really, really hated, and unfortunately, I was a developer back in the day, and they you used to have actually a really decent developer discount on hardware, which they got rid of course, but I bought one of the first Mac portables, and that thing was a dog. I had almost, the battery in that thing, I always said, maybe they should have made it a little bit larger and actually just put a car battery in it. But the battery would last, maybe if you were lucky, maybe 40 to 45 minutes. So you always needed to be near a plug. It was slow, it was loud, the screen was horrible, that was a dog. And, it didn't surprise me all that much that, I think it was 2 years later, you got the first PowerBooks that came out. And they were so much better than, that Mac portable. That was awful piece of equipment. Apple keeps surprising us, with some of their products. The iPhone was, I think, a total shocker for a lot of people because there were very few flat screen, non-keyboard phones when it first came out in 2007. And then, you think about the Apple Watch has become a real game changer. It surprises me how many times I see them nowadays. It seems like they're everywhere. The AirPods, another thing that you see a lot of that just really, they weren't a new product or a new product category, but they were something that Apple did differently and did very well. Are there any products that you have dreamed about that you would like to see Apple come out with, or that you think that they might, magically come out within the next year or two?
I have to think about that.
Yeah, that's a tough one.
Nothing on the trips off the tip of my tongue right there.
We've heard a lot about,
I will say that there have been a couple of products that Apple's eliminated that I thought were mistakes. I think I still use the time capsule for backup, and
Yeah.
I love it. And I would buy another one if I could get it. I think it's a great concept, and I'm sad that Apple walked away from that one. I'm not quite sure why.
Yeah, that
Uh,
and just getting rid of their own Wi-Fi hotspot, the airport. I always thought, was one of the best units I ever had. It never reset. Um, Setup was very easy on it. You could do firmware updates, pretty easily. Uh, on the other hand, I've got, I think I'm using a TP-Link uh, unit right now, and it's fast and it's, pretty good, but I just don't feel like, the one thing I loved about the airport, and the Airport Extreme in particular, was you could bring up that airport utility and you could really get a lot of good information out of it if you knew where to
yes.
look. So, not sure why they got rid of that. Oh, man. So, I know that you basically do some iOS development as well. Uh, do you think that down the road you're going to see almost a merging of the operating systems? We know that, for instance, iOS applications are going to be able to run on Apple Silicon. Uh, but do you think we're going to see some sort of merger or blending of the operating systems?
I think you will see components that are reused among devices. There's probably some of that going on now that we don't know about.
Yeah.
That kind of down deep. But really, Apple's actually kind of gone the other direction with the iPod OS.
Yeah.
I mean, the iPad OS, excuse me. Um, and it's very similar to iOS, but it's got specific things for the iPad. And particularly in terms of the user interface, I think that's going to be a requirement. And they're different form factors, different sizes. Even though you can get some really big phone if you want it, you can get a pretty small iPad if you want it. At some
Yeah.
point, they become almost the same thing. But no, I think that will. Frankly, I don't really want to use an iOS app on the Mac because I don't think it's going to be very user friendly. Now, I could be wrong, but we'll see. I think that the really good apps, though, are tailored for the hardware that they're going to run on.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it's going to be interesting. In some respects, there are some apps that are on iOS that aren't on Mac that I just love. And I've kind of gotten excited about that, saying, "Oh, that'll be so cool to be able to take app XYZ over here and run it finally on a Mac." But once again, like you said, is that going to translate over all that well? Depending on how they, allow you to resize the actual application window. So that'll be very, very different. One question for you. We've talked a little bit about, older Macs and things like that. Do you have a collection of any vintage Apple devices? Any?
I wouldn't call it a collection. I've got a lamp-based iMac. I've got. I actually don't have one of the big iMacs. Got a couple of the flat screen ones. We have a local Apple user group here, like probably you have one in Denver. And
Oh yeah.
I'm active in that, and what I've managed to do is convince people that when they upgrade, if they don't know what they want to do with their older machine, I'll wipe it for them and try to repurpose it and give it to some kids, college
Cool.
kids or high school kids that parents can't afford one or whatever. And that worked out real good for a few years until I started getting iMacs instead of PowerBooks and MacBook Pros. And the kids, for the most part, don't want the iMacs. They want the portability. So I've ended up with some I got 3 or 4 iMacs that are, you know, they're good up through Mojave, and that's it. And
Yeah. It's always fun to, it's interesting. Some people I've run into over the years who they keep every machine they've ever had, and they've got these massive collections. And I always wonder what they're going to do with them. Will them to a museum or something at some point in their life. But I've been always one of those people. I don't have the money to really be able to afford going out and I have to sell my old equipment to be able to afford the new one. Always been that way.
I'm pretty much the same way. I've got some right now. I happen to have some older gear just because of this little education project I did with the club. But
about the.
I usually keep one older machine around for backup purposes. But,
always a good thing.
Well, yeah. I mean, if your main machine goes down, you at least need to be able to do email. It's not such a big deal now with an iPad and an iPhone. I can do email on those, but I don't particularly like to. Definitely prefer a big screen and a comfortable chair.
Well, yeah, it was so funny because I've always pretty much had, at least for the last 20 some odd years, I've always tried to have 2 Macs. And for many years, my main machine was an iMac, 27-inch iMac with a beautiful screen. And I finally decided, I said, nah, I'm just going to get to one machine now. I'm going to get the MacBook because I can take it on trips with me, and my wife and I like to do a lot of traveling, so that kind of made it handy. And there were certain things that I couldn't do even on an iPad Pro that I really needed the Mac for. Well, sure enough, like I said, I get this MacBook Pro, love it. Promptly run into a situation where I, spilled all the water on it, and it was gone for almost 2 weeks. And it occurred to me that, you really do need to have a backup Mac. So I ended up going out and I found a refurb MacBook Air. And, it's not as loaded as this thing, but at least I know if something happens to this machine, I can do my work on that other little machine. Mm-hmm. And it's ended up being my beta machine, too. It's running Big Sur right now. And, I kind of like Big Sur, I got to admit. It just looks different. It's very... certain things, the fonts that they're using for the menus, the little, whatever the heck you call them, but basically the icons, I can't think of what you call them, up in the upper right-hand side of your screen. But those little icons are, all a lot more consistent, or at least for the Apple apps. So it's kind of interesting, I don't know how, the actual version's going to work when I actually put it on this machine, but at least the beta on the MacBook Air has been working like a champ, really.
Well, there is a design trend, as you mentioned, icons, that I'm not real fond of, and that's this sort of double-pronged readability issue. They keep going to smaller and smaller text, where you can't change it. And often it's like medium gray on a light gray background, or, gray on gray.
Yeah.
you need contrast.
Yeah.
So people, I think they've got the people that, the kids that come right out of high school with perfect vision that are designing
Exactly.
these things. And I've noticed Big Sur has gone a little bit in that direction, and it seems like they backed up. So we'll see how they finally end up. But there were some things that I encountered in installing Big Sur that I could hardly read what it was saying because the font was so small and it was just a light color on a light background.
Yeah, speaking of the redesign of Apple World today, that's been one of the big things I'm looking at is we had, when we originally came out with the design, it was kind of thrown together very quickly because the unofficial Apple weblog was going out of business. They were shutting us down. And so we had to get this thing up and running quickly. And one thing that I think was very, very helpful is we had one guy who was helping us working on the site, and he said, make the font bigger, so people can actually read it, and get a lot more contrast in the text so I can read it. And so that really got us thinking about accessibility and being able to read that type of thing. With the new site, the one thing I want to be able to do, and not the new site, but the new design, is to actually be able to have people, let them be able to actually change the font on their own. So if they want, a larger text size, for bad eyesight like I've got, they can. If they want smaller so they can fit more articles into a page, let's let them be able to do that. And so that's yet another design challenge we've kind of put ourselves into there. But accessibility, I don't think a lot of people really understand until, you start, maybe your eyes are going a little bit. I know I've got hearing issues now. I've been wearing hearing aids for almost 2 years. And it surprises me how many people, they go, oh, well, I'll just put in my AirPods. And I'm going, I can't use AirPods. Guess what? But at least I've got, good Bluetooth connection to my hearing aids, which is kind of cool there. So one fun question to kind of end it up for today. What do you like to do when you're not working, when you're not programming? You live in Florida. You usually have good weather. Any outdoor things you like doing? Or?
Yes. For years, I was a runner until I finally wrecked my knee. And I've recently gone back to jogging. I'm like the world's slowest jogger now, but I like to get outside when the weather's nice and just move around. I love to swim. Love swimming in the ocean.
Nice.
If I get the chance to go on a geology field trip, I'd love to go look at rocks. I know it's sort of a weird hobby, but I looked at rocks every day when I was going through college. So,
well, that was one of the classes I took as a senior in engineering school. They had a engineering geology class, and I was at the time during the summers as a kind of an engineering student. I got a job in a geotechnical lab, and I was doing soil samples and rock samples. We were doing all sorts of fun stuff with that. And sure enough, my senior year we had this geology class, and we did field trips. And I kept going, why the hell didn't I go into geology? Well, fortunately for me, I did continue with engineering, and when all the geologists were unemployed a couple of years later, I still had a job. So, that was, of course, the engineering job, like I said, turned into IT very quickly. So, you got to figure, things happen for a reason, somehow, some way.
Well, and the other part of the answer to your question is leaving out the last 6 months or so. Wife and I like to go to movies and theater and things like that. And we haven't really gone anywhere
Yeah.
for a while now. But and we have family in this part of Florida, so
Cool.
I like to visit with them.
Yeah, always helps to have the local, or people who are around, that you can get together with. I've got a very small family. My wife's family is, pretty much everybody's either passed on, or she's got some relatives that live in Nevada and California. But it's just it seems like our family keeps getting smaller and smaller. I've got a sister who lives in eastern Washington State. She's out here visiting right now, so unfortunately we haven't been able to see her yet because her husband does a lot of bike riding, real extreme bike riding, and so she's ferrying him around to all these different sites to do bike rides right now, and we haven't been able to see her that much. But I think this afternoon we'll probably finally get together, which is cool. Well, Jim, I really appreciated you getting on the show and being our guest. I'm definitely going to get this out there. Some people, I noticed we did have a few folks who were watching the show live. Generally, we get a lot more viewers when we actually put the file out on YouTube with edits and sound adjusted and everything like that, and my background turns into a brick wall or a nice office or something like that. So we'll get that done, and I will send you a link to the YouTube goodies out there. So if anybody, if you want to let your website visitors know about it, interview with you, we can do that. Anyway, thanks again, Jim. Really appreciated your visit.
Well, thanks for having me, and nice to get to know you a little better. Keep in touch.
Sounds good. We'll definitely keep in touch. In fact, you'll probably be getting an email from me in a couple of days here. We've got some plans for something we're going to do for the holiday season this year, so we'll keep you in mind on that. Well, thanks everybody for watching this episode of Apple World Today Live, or AWT Live. We'll be back soon with another interview with another face from the world of Apple. Thank you for joining us.